But this is our third and, luck willing, final walkthrough of making a maze game. I'm excited to see the kind of maze games that you're going to make out of this very basic one that we're making together. When we last left off, we created a couple enemies and we added it to our list of functions to call before running Pygame Zero. It included make enemies and make walls. So the make enemies function just creates the enemies and appends them to our list of enemies so that when we run, remember we refactored the update method. So update is called before every frame, and now we have it called update hero and update enemies. The update hero involves moving left or right depending on the values of our dictionary, which was set by the on key down turns them on, and on key up turns them off. The update enemies right now, basically, I'm using these geared enemies that spin, and it kind of makes them look somewhat menacing. So I'm having their angle change by 2 degrees. Now the angle can go all the way from 0 to 360, making a complete circle. Now, one of the things that might be beneficial to do is we can actually print this. That's probably the most useful reason to have print in a program is to see what's going on. So I want to print the angles of our enemies. I'm going to get 2 for each one of them. And you can see as they're spinning, they're getting higher and higher and higher. So they're not resetting back to 360 at all. Those are just the total revolutions, okay? So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. So, you could have an angle of 720, but that means that you've just done 2 complete rotations and you're pointing back where you were before. All right, I want to make my enemies move up and down. So the truth of the matter is that this would be more easily done with some techniques that we haven't learned yet. But for what we have now, it'll work okay. So I'm going to make a method that's going to count frames. So I'm going to call this ticks. Okay? If I have to count frames for something else, I'd have to call it ticks 1, ticks 2, ticks 3, or hero ticks, or enemy ticks. So, maybe it would be better if I called this enemy ticks. I think I'll go ahead and do that, just in case you later want to add more. So, enemy tick 0. I need to leave enemy ticks as a global variable so that I can adjust it inside a function. If I define the variable inside a function, it's going to reset over and over and over again. So we're going to define it here globally. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the... We're going to go down to... the update enemies function. Where was that? Here it is. So in update enemies, we're going to do this. First of all, we need access to a global variable, so we'll say global enemy ticks. So that's just declaring that I need access to that global variable. Let's increase it by 1. So this will count the number of calls to update enemies. So every time the update enemies function is called, enemy ticks is going to go up by 1. I'm just going to make a variable here called up amount. And I want to say that up amount is 100. So up amount is the amount of ticks we're going to go up for, not the number of pixels, because that's going to vary based on how much it moves. And I'm going to say if enemy ticks is less than up amount, then enemy dot y plus equals 1. So if the enemy's up amount, well, actually up is minus, so let's do minus. So it's going to go up 1 pixel. Else if, so elif, if enemy ticks is less than twice the up amount, so since up amount is 100, this would be elif means it was the first part was not true. So we know that it's more than the first up amount. So we know it's more than, if it gets to the elif here, if it reads elif, the first part has to be false. So we know that enemy ticks is more than 100, but less than 200. Well, then I want to go down. So it's going to go back down the same amount that it went up. Okay? And down is actually plus. But what if it's even more than 200? Well, then that's when I just reset it. And this can actually be done with modulo arithmetic, but we'll study more later. But this is a fine way to do it. Oh, I'm sorry, not up amount equals 0. Sorry. We had to start over enemy ticks. There we go. Enemy ticks goes back to 0. So enemy's ticks should go up with every frame. For the first 100 frames, we're going to go up. The next 100 frames, we're going to go down. Then we start back over with our count. Repeating the whole thing over again. And so what happens is you can see we have this kind of roaming thing. Now, this is the reason why I created that little local variable. I actually would like to see these, my personal choice, yours might be different, I'd like to see them go up more. So I'm going to go ahead and change the up amount to 150. Okay? And so I don't have to go in and change this and this or recalculate what twice it is. It's automatically done it for me. If I don't like that, I can do more. And in fact, I will. I'm going to do 200. I could also change the amount that it goes up on each tick by changing what I changed the y by. And we could use a variable for that as well. But to me, that looks pretty menacing. Okay, it's not very many enemies. All right, so with any luck, you have some enemies running around the screen. You can look left and look right as you move, and you can't run through walls, but we can run through enemies. So it is time for us to handle that. So, without further ado, let's get that going. All right, now you might find this somewhat morbid, but we're going to use the Boolean variable. Remember Boolean, named after the great algebra master George Boole, are either true or false. And we are going to make alive. And so we are now able to kill the hero. And the way we kill the hero is we set alive to false. And believe it or not, this is pretty much embedded in most any game you've ever played in which you can die. If you, as a young lad was told that if you jump down a certain pit, then Mario gets like a free 100 lives. I fell for that a few times back in the 80s. No, after you jump in the pit, Mario.alive is set to false. So, well, we're just going to stick with this global variable. We'll be dealing more with, it would be so much nicer if we had a variable like hero.alive, but we're stuck with just the variables for hero that we got from Pygame because we haven't learned how to add to that yet. That's coming, just not right now. I usually have a strict no class till after Christmas, but anyway. So we've got a variable called alive. Fantastic. So guess what we get to do now? We're going to add to our update. We have update hero, but we don't want to be able to move unless we're alive. So we just say if alive. Now, some of my students like to say this. They'll say if alive is equal to true. Remember, 2 equal signs checks if it equals 1 equal sign actually assigns a value. But this is saying if true equals true. Well, true equals true is true. So it's really just saying if true. So let's just say that. And I love the way it reads. If alive, update hero. But with every single frame update, we need to check for what? Death. That'd have been more dramatic if I spelled it right the first time. But check for death. So, let's see. I've got update enemies, update hero. I like to have some sort of, like, logic behind the arrangement of my functions. Like, I prefer my functions that are just setup functions, like the make enemies, make walls at the bottom. Then I handle my key presses above that. So I think under update hero, we'll go ahead and do check for death. Check for death. So we are going to be changing the global variable living. So let's get access to the global variable living. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all my enemies and see if... Now remember, each actor in Pygame 0 has a rectangle around it. So yeah, no, we don't have pixel perfect collision detection here. I'm sorry. But you can do that if you wanted to form like a more complicated actor out of several different sub-actors, like an arm and a leg and all that. But we are not doing that right now. We're just going to stick with the basic rectangle that surrounds the whole thing. So for enemy in enemies is what we're going to say. Now, I need to get access to the global variable alive. I wrote it as living in my notes, but alive is what I call it here, which I like better. So I'm probably going to make that mistake again. Thank you for catching that, Tank. And then, so for enemy in enemies. So we're going to loop through all our enemies. Now, you know, hopefully your game has more than 2 enemies. Or, I don't know, you could do with just 2. You know, also you could have some enemies that move and some enemies that don't. You know, you could have like a, a list of moving enemies and stationary enemies or left-right enemies and up-down enemies, whatever, you want. But I'm going to loop through all these enemies, okay? And I'm going to see if my hero's rectangle collides with them. It's called collide, C-O-L-L-I-D-E, and they don't put a space like that. They just put the rect right after it. Collide rect with my enemy. And actually, I could do that the other way. I could say enemy.collide rect hero, same thing. So that's going to return true if my hero is colliding. Well, if that's happening, then alive equals false. Yeah, that's it, alive equals false. Okay, so the question is, should I use 1 or 2? So equals would be asking, like if I wanted to say if alive is false, I would use 2 equal signs. 2 equal signs is asking, are you equal? 1 equal sign will actually override the value that's there and set it to that value. That's the difference between the two. I wish that Python had used like this symbol. That looks like less than or equal to, though, so it's already taken, I guess. Maybe something like that. Like I wish they used an arrow so that you could see we're storing false into alive, but this has just become the norm. So that's just what they go with. All right. So we now have a check for death method. So let's run it. And let's see if we properly die upon hitting our enemies. Oh. Now, a great thing to do there would be to change the image to, I would think, a decapitated alien. And you could use some sort of ticks to make blood spew. I'm going to leave that up to you. I don't think Pygame 0 supports animated GIFs. Y'all can try that. I don't think it does. You have to have a little more frame control. That'll be something in Java when we study Java together next year. Animated GIFs are supported, and that's always fun to do. So yeah, I've got a dead little guy there. I could load up an entirely different background color. Would be cool as well. Uh, so there's lots of things we could do. But I'm going to go to my draw method, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so we're going to add some more things here. We're going to say if alive. Well, if alive, I want the screen filled with blue, right? But else screen.fill. Now, do we have a red? Yeah, I do. All right, I'm going to do like a light red, okay? So I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to do a light red. No, a dark red. Dark red. There we go. RGB. So I'm talking like 25500. That's the max amount of red and lowest of everything else, okay? Now, I didn't have to declare this color. I could have just put it in parentheses. We did that before. But I don't know. I just kind of like defining my colors. Okay? So there's my dark red. So when you die, and I hope you understand, this is because the entire screen has been filled, all of the shining, with just a bucket of the alien's blood. Yeah, you know what else might be nice? Let's write to the screen. Screen.draw.text. You lose. Now, at the very minimum, when you do text, you have to give it you have to give it an XY coordinate of where you want to write to. You have to. And again, it's one of those situations where they are what they call a tuple. They have to be in parentheses. So I played around with mine a little bit, and I found like 200, 30. So that worked for me. This is the minimum amount of parameters that you have to put text. But you can add some more. So you could tell it that you want a color. Like I'll do color equals orange, maybe. And I don't know why they have a set color for these. They do. You don't have. I think you can use. I think you have to use a set color of strings, and then you can do font size. I'm going to do 120, so it's going to be a big font. Oh, you know what? I'm missing my... Hey, y'all, go back and check. I'm missing that parenthesis for my XY coordinate. I opened it, but I didn't close it. That's why I was looking all weird. So that should say that. Okay? Yeah, there you go. All right, so here I am, and hopefully you find this as menacing as I do. Yeah, that's deadly. You'll notice that I'm actually drawn on top of my spinner guy. That is actually entirely defined based on the order in which I draw myself. So if you don't want to be above your enemies, then draw first. So that's a pretty simple change. Look how peaceful. It's like a nice blue screen. Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. Oh, now you see it goes over me. All right, we are now back at yours and my absolute favorite, Kenny, right? So if you would go to Kenny's assets, you can just Google it. Kenny assets. Just super fun. And we're looking at audio, okay? And we've already done sound effects, I think, right? We've already loaded some sound effects. So I'm going to leave that as a something for you to do. But I want to go to music jingles. I mean, come on, this is good. So we're going to download it, and it's going to be a zip file. I'm going to save it in sound packs just as music jingles, because every great game needs a great music jingle. Now, this is not the only kind of music you can put in. Pygame does support. See, I have a list of it here. Pygame supports Wave and OGG. So, you need to use one of those two. I don't know about MP3. I don't think so. So let's see here. I should have that downloaded now in my sound packs. So I'll navigate there and I will undo the music jingles. Okay, so Kenny sounds are great for making our own songs. So you could use a music editor and put them together. I did find if you go to opengameart.org, the only problem with opengameart.org, it's a really cool site, and you'll notice Kenny's on there a ton, is that some people are not like open source, and we need to respect people's copyright, even though they're being lame and not doing open source. But you can actually filter that. I'm not sure how, but this guy here, this NES, I went to opengameart.org, and I went to browse music, and like I went to this NES shooter is one of the first things that came up. So you could probably search for that. You can look for certain tags. When I clicked on that, there were several different previews here. And then, all right. So that's what I'm going to try. So I don't usually like to use waves, but I think these are pretty small. So I'll download the wave zip. And then I'll just, let's see here. I'll make a new folder, and I'm going to call this NES Sounds. Some pretty cool stuff here. Save it, and then I should be able to hopefully extract that. That was under sound packs. Let's see here. NES Sounds, Wave. Let's extract that right there. And let's see what we got for options here. Okay. Boss. Ooh, okay. Wonder what Mars sounds like. You'll notice these are big files. These wave files are pretty big. So you usually want to kind of avoid them. If at all possible. But it'll be alright as long as you just have one. That's not bad. Alright, I'm going with Mars, y'all. I'm going with Mars. Going with Mars. So I'm not sure for certain, but I'm guessing that we need to save this with lowercase names. Y'all could try it each way if you want. All right, so we got a new asset here for our game, so we're going to need to make a new folder. Do you remember doing this for images? This one's called Sounds. And we're just going to go and we will paste it right there. And I am going to go ahead and lowercase that puppy. All right, sweet. So let's try and make it work. So So let's try sounds dot Mars dot play and then we can tell it how many times we want it to loop. So you could like play it 100 times, 1,000 times, 1 time. But if you tell it negative 1 time, it'll play forever. So I think that should do it. All right, I don't know if y'all are picking this up to the microphone, but this is just utterly epic. Um, so, maybe when you die, you could say sounds.mars.stop and then go from there. Oh, no. Oh, I put it under if alive. Oh, no. All right. That's if you're dead. Yeah, so if you're dead, I think when you die, that's when the music stops. Actually, you probably want to play death music. I'm sure you all probably are more familiar with that than me. Oh, okay. So I can just keep going, because this is super exciting. But I wanted to get y'all going on some things. So instead of doing it like I thought, but let me tell you what I want to see. Okay, so I'm going to take this game and I'm not going to code it, all right? I'm just going to take a screenshot of it and draw on it, okay? So let me use the greatest program ever written, Snipping Tool. And, all right, thank you, Epic Music. All right. And I'm just gonna paint on this. Hold on, let me bring up a paint. So here's where this is going to go. All right, look, you ought to be able to make some more rectangles here, and make some more like. Now, why isn't it filling? I want solid color fill. And with these rectangles, you ought to be able to make some pretty interesting maze stuff, right? I'm not sure why these aren't filled in, okay? But, and you got to have a goal for your maze, okay? And one of the things I like to do is to have a wall. And so, like, maybe right down here, okay, we're going to have a different color wall. Oh, no, not yet. Hold on. So, maybe like a green wall, okay? And so the way that you do that, you have it as a different color. And that's so that wall wouldn't be in like your walls list. It would be like a special wall. And that special wall, it can be removed if the player gets a key. So you can add another actor over here that's like a key, and that key just sits there until you get that key, thereby unlocking that door. You can either make the door automatically be removed, or you can make it to where the logic of the game doesn't allow you to advance through the door unless you have that key. You could use a global variable like has key, set it to true when you get it, make this key disappear, right? How do we make things disappear? Well, we can decide whether or not to draw them. So if the character has the key, you don't draw the key. If the character doesn't have the key, you do draw the key. So if he has the key, you don't draw the key and you let him go through the door. Okay, those are the kind of things that I was thinking of. There are some other cool ideas that I've seen. I like portals, so that if you get to this portal, it warps you over to this other one and vice versa. So there's just lots of different things you can do. And then if you want to get extremely adventurous, you can make a second level that will load up when you reach this area that just completely redesigns everything, moves the walls around. That's going to be, for those of you out there that are willing to stretch it and go that far. But as far as I'm concerned, those are my ideas. I am done with Maze Game. I know it's not much of a maze right now, but you have all the tools to make it such. So, good luck.